Welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor podcast, where we will be spending as little time as possible this week talking about prostates and pee. We're talking Kaoh episode 13, and we're now 1 week away from the finale of this season. Andy, are you hyped or what? Didn't this episode get you up?
So up! No, not at all. And I'm not going to complain about it because I don't really think there was anything the show could have done about it.
Right.
But I don't think anything that happened in that 42 minutes we watched will matter at all.
Yeah, it was really just kicking the can for 40 straight minutes. I mean, it was nice that we got a little glimpse of Joe and him being happy because you haven't seen him all season. But I don't know that I needed a full week's episode of it. Although, again, they were kind of boxed into having to do that, though.
Yeah, and I don't think they could have, put this one in the finale and spread out, Caleb and Alicia. Because Caleb happened, within the, first half day of, an episode.
Right.
He thought this one felt stretched out. That one would have been really stretched. And, they spent a legitimate amount of time on, that challenge and all the medical stuff on the Caleb episode. They did all they could there, but they couldn't have gotten 42 minutes out of that. So it had to happen. And maybe this is one of the reasons why they were super psyched about this season, is they know right as they're building momentum, it's kind of like, eh.
Yeah, and it is disappointing because it's been a very good season. And we'd kind of been expecting this because we knew from preseason interviews with Mark Burnett that there was 3 evacuations this season. And so as it went further and further into the season, it got kind of suspicious that we were seeing Joe struggling a little bit. And so at a certain point, you knew it was going to happen. And for it to happen this late is just, it kind of takes the wind out of the sails.
Yeah, what do you think about that now that we've kind of seen it? Do you think it was a mistake to let out that there was 3 medevacs? Did that foreknowledge kind of maybe ruin a bit of the experience? Or did it maybe cushion the blow?
I don't know. I kind of feel like I would have been better off not knowing they were coming. Although this episode probably would have pissed me off if I wasn't prepared for that.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, yeah.
Yeah, it really just sucks the fun out of this episode because you're expecting something to finally happen. The lines have to break right now, and no, they don't.
And how deep into the episode did it take you to realize that this was the Joe Medevac episode that everyone was pretty much predicting?
I think once I got a few confessionals from Joe very early on, I was like, oh, okay, so this is what's happening this week then?
Yeah, that was when you first start to think it. But, he had the visibility spike last week, so it's like, well, it could still be next week. Although at that point you're like, do I really want it in the finale? I remember how exciting it was when Eric Reichenbach was taken out. But then, yeah, as soon as he started eating the beef, it's like, all right, there we go. He's getting kind of guyed.
Yeah, and it was funny the way they edited the Sydney confessional of oh man, he's eating beef, that's a terrible idea. And then it cuts back to her just looking at him watching no, I'm good, Joe. You just keep eating that, to make it look like she knows she's clairvoyant. She knows what's going to happen to him and she's just going to let it go.
Yeah, last week, we were wondering, what was everybody's move for this week? Because they couldn't vote out Ty. Although apparently Joe wasn't in on that.
He wasn't so sure about that.
Yeah. And one of the big ones is what's Sydney's plan? Because I'm guessing she doesn't want to vote out Michelle. That's what this whole thing was about. Maybe this was it. She wanted to take out Joe and she saw her opportunity and she went for it.
She probably was hoping to take out Joe, I guess. If she really was that close with Michelle, what's her other option?
Yeah. Now, we should make it clear. I'm sure her plan was to hope to vote out Joe.
Yeah.
I don't think she was trying to cause a 70-year-old man incredible pain and discomfort.
Yeah, but again, the fact that we knew the medevac was coming, I guess it prepared me for this, so it was less of a letdown?
Yeah, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I think, maybe it's one half of the other, whatever that phrase is.
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, and I don't know why I brought that up right now, because there was people at my old place of business that would always say it, and it would just annoy me, because in the way that, whenever somebody repeats the same phrase over and over again, it annoys you, hey, did you know it's Wednesday today?
I wouldn't know what that's like. If you want, I'll remove that from the edit of this podcast just so I don't trigger you.
No, I think it's good. But, so yeah, while we're talking about the reward, and we're going to be talking about reward tonight. That's what kind of episode it was. That challenge was not well thought out.
No, even if that challenge had been run really well, do you think it would have been exciting?
That's an excellent point. At peak challenge, it's like, hey, we're gonna, try to spice up this whole bag throwing by putting in a seemingly meaningless running portion of it.
Right. Run into woods, grab a bag, come back, throw the bags.
Yeah, and as somebody at our site pointed out, running into the woods is, cinematically a dumb idea because you have no sense of time or space.
Right. And it skews everybody's perspective. You see, like the one static shot they can get of people running up to get the bags in the woods. It's not ideal.
And then, it was like, okay, they threw bags and then they had to sit there. And that's just dumb. And I know some people are like, well, I guess it was kind of funny. I'll say that. So for one time, it had some very unintentional comedy. But, the idea that it levels the playing field for somebody who can barely move, that shouldn't be a goal of competition. But like they in San Juan del Sur, they should have made all the challenges so that like a one-legged person could do them.
The one takeaway that I had was that Sydney has good running form. Cause you know that I watch these things.
No, man, you could have gotten that from another challenge. But yeah, I like how, for this challenge, they're like, it doesn't count unless you get it into your own, spot. And then the very next season, they don't have that rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's because they thought, hey, we just had a challenge last season where like, lanes are like right next to each other and no one even there threw a bag into it. So how could somebody possibly ever hit a target this far apart?
Exactly. Who even needs that rule? What's the likelihood of it ever happening?
We were overthinking it. So yeah, that was a dumb challenge. But from a strategic element, you had the choice of who to bring. So Joe wins and he has to choose. And I'm not sure how well that was handled.
Well, why would he not immediately pick Aubrey? I mean,
Aubrey is perfect. No problems there.
Yes.
Yeah, no blowback. Everybody would be like, yeah, of course. Not picking Aubrey, people would be like, you're trying too hard.
Right. It would be too obvious what you're doing anyway.
Yeah. So it's the next one that I want to talk about.
Okay. Well, and I think actually this kind of makes sense too, that he punted the decision to Aubrey. Like, no, go ahead. I just wanted you, so pick whoever you want.
Yeah, maybe that's fine for Joe. What I'm saying for Aubrey is that was stupid. She should have been like, no, it's your reward, Joe. You go ahead and pick. Because I fully understand that that's a tough position for her to be in. To choose between two potential allies in Sydney and Ty. Both of whom would carry risk going back, with Michelle. Cause I don't think Sydney would be like, yeah, I'm cool with that. Now, as I was getting on about last week, Ty was the one with the idol. So, that makes him a little bit more than just one person. But more than that, like, she just shouldn't have made the choice. She didn't have to. Keep your mouth shut. Put that on Joe.
Yeah, she certainly could have just deferred it back to Joe, like, no. And it would have looked really magnanimous too. Like, no, Joe, you earned this. There's definitely a way you could sell that.
Yeah, like the big difficulty in winning rewards, especially this late in the season, is you are going to alienate people. And there's some, sometimes a cost-benefit analysis of that, but often the best way to go about it is not be the person who chooses. She wasn't until she was. And that wasn't something she needed to do. What do you think about her choosing Sydney?
I think that was probably a consequence of last week's vote.
Mm-hmm.
And just how badly Ty felt burned. I also think that she might have had it in the back of her mind that she could just go and soothe Ty's hurt ego and he would be right back in with her, which she seemed to have been pretty good with for most of this season.
Yeah, no, and it's possible. I'm not sure how much that was in her thinking, and this, there's no way of knowing until somebody asks her. But she did it, so, good on her for that. Or at least it seems like she did, because who knows?
Right, which is yet another disappointment of this episode. You don't really know if it worked.
But isn't it kind of weird that it's, at least from the edit, and the edit was using Aubrey's own words, that seemed like that challenge was the first time she clued into the fact that Sydney could be a threat.
That was amazing to me. And again, I think we've kind of discussed in previous weeks that Aubrey shouldn't be too concerned about who she takes to Final Tribal, because I think she probably beats just about any of them. Well, at this point, any of them. But still though, did you not see Sydney as a threat at all? I mean, even for a vote or two that might be pulled away from you?
Yeah, I'm not sure what this says more about, Sydney's game or Aubrey's game. Cause I don't think it was a good look for Aubrey. Especially when, like, right after she's like, so I should really work with Ty. It's like, whoa, now you think of that? Like, why didn't you do that calculus before? When you really had that option? Cause from Joe's exit interviews, it doesn't sound like he wanted to vote for Jason, but I don't know if he was so dead set against it that he would have gone against Aubrey. It sounded like that was a joint decision. And even from her own, like, bonus scenes, it seemed like she was, she felt great about that decision in the moment because she finally got to stop getting pushed around by Ty, which, but yeah, so I don't think it was a great look for her, but then it's like, what does this say about Sydney? Her closest ally doesn't think she can win. Does this say that Sydney is playing a really great game and people aren't seeing what kind of threat she is? Or is it saying that she might have an uphill climb in suggesting to people, when it counts, that she's been playing a great game that they should vote for?
Yeah, little column A, little column B. I think if Aubrey ends up winning this season, to me it's going to feel like China, where the winner just made very clear mistakes along the path to victory, and they just never backfired to a degree enough to hurt the winner's game. And for some reason, I'm trying to avoid spoiling the winner of Survivor China as I give this explanation.
And this is honorable, even though we spoil winners all the time.
Yeah. I may as well just make it clearer. So Todd made some clear mistakes along the way, and they just didn't do enough to completely sabotage his game. They ended up working out okay, which sometimes will happen. I mean, we've talked about how important luck is. He lucked out. Aubrey might just luck out.
Yeah, and like, here's the thing with Survivor. You don't need to be great necessarily to win it all. You just need to be better than everyone else.
Well, the nice thing is you don't even have to be lucky every time. I mean, you can get unlucky on certain occasions, and as long as it doesn't completely blow up your game, you can recover from that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's lucky all the way through in order to win. It's just a key element. But it's interesting you bring up China, because I think another comparison that might be helpful is that Todd was in very much a partnership in China with Amanda, who was, as a key role player, and in fact, sometimes took the wheel and steered him out of some really bad ditches he was heading towards. But it didn't matter in front of the final jury because they didn't see it that way, and she wasn't able to make them see that way. And where that comparison could happen is, if Sydney and Aubrey were together, even if Sydney did equal partnership with Aubrey, even if Sydney drove the action a few times, if the jury doesn't see it that way, then it doesn't matter.
And what's funny is I think that more often than not, Sydney was the one calling the shots and Aubrey was relenting. That was a big point that we had in the podcast last week, is Aubrey relents a lot.
Yeah, so it's basically all about perception, and, it might seem unfair to us watching at home, like, oh, so-and-so was an equal partner, but, no one ever said Survivor was fair. So while they were away at the reward, we saw Ty and Michelle, left back at camp, potentially bonding, potentially forming some alliances, and was there anything to that stuff?
Probably not. I mean, I just kind of get the feeling that Ty is down for whoever was nicest to him most recently.
And then Aubrey scooped her, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of think that too. I think that that's not really worth analyzing too much because I don't think it will necessarily come to fruition. I will say that I think Michelle did a good job there. I think that she he did try to get her out, just like a day or so ago. And she was able to let that drop and try to open doors with Ty in case there was an avenue there to use.
It's funny that you mentioned opening doors like Michelle did about 15 times within a 2-minute span.
That's what winners do. So yeah, I think she deserves credit there, and I think that was a glimpse into her supposedly legendary social game.
Yeah, and really, she did the right thing. She didn't push it too hard. She just sort of tried to lay some bait and let him come to her, which I think was fairly successful. I just, again, I'm not convinced that, he really went all in on Michelle.
No, I mean, there's no way of knowing. There was still so much time, but I kind of got the feeling that if this episode had gotten to play out, he wasn't going to be making a move to, preserve Michelle and take out Aubrey. So I think, she did what she could. It was a good play.
Yeah. But of course they didn't get to vote this week. So now we're down to a final 4 and he has to decide who to vote for again. So who's Ty's target this week?
Yeah. So I think obviously who you get to go after all depends on your level of security. So I think it might be fun to kind of piece it out. If these people are immune, who would be their first choice? Because often who you should go for is like, well, who are the other two people going for?
Mm-hmm.
Or, who do you need to go for in order to protect yourself? But if these people are the decision maker, who the person with immunity almost always is. Every once in a while, I guess you can get a worlds apart situation where Mike, all he can really choose is to force the tie. I wanted to kind of think of who everyone should go after the Final Four immunity. And I think one thing that should be noted, and I think people are forgetting this, all of these people are operating as though it's the final three. So this vote won't be, who do I need to go in order to get to the next vote to win? Who could I beat in the final challenge? I think everyone will be approaching this vote unless somehow when they go up to a challenge, Jeff makes it known that this is not the final challenge. Like he doesn't say this is the final member of the jury or anything like that. I believe that they will be voting expecting that the people left over would be the ones that they go in front of the jury.
And for the record, I'm not ruling out that it's a final three. I think it's still possible.
Agreed. You're asked about Ty, who he should be targeting. I think it's Sydney. Most of them are probably equally dangerous to him in front of a jury, but Sydney is probably the one that would most attack him in a jury situation. And I think she's also the one that has the most different story than him.
Yeah, and this is the only cop-out answer I'm going to give. I don't think with Ty that there's a move that you can make that wins you back enough jury votes. So essentially it'll just come out down to whichever way the other two people want to vote, because what can he do? Even voting out Sydney, does that get him jury votes? Is that going to get him Jason and Scott's vote back? Is that going to somehow win Julia over to his side? And I don't see it.
I think what voting out Sydney does for Ty, is that he can maybe still be true to himself, or at least speak to that in front of a jury, Aubrey's been the person who's been the most demonstrably nice to him that he hasn't yet voted out. So if he also took her out, I think he would take more heat. Whereas I don't get the sense that he and Sydney have any relationship at all. And that way he can talk about how, he tried to play, the way that he felt like playing, which being true to himself. And that's why he turned on Jason and Scott in the first place, that he never felt comfortable there, but he was pushed into there by everyone else. So I think at least Sydney, getting rid of her and at the very least not getting rid of Aubrey allows him to make that argument. I don't know if it'd be successful, but he has to do with the cards he's got.
All right. So let's move on to Aubrey then. Who should Aubrey's target be?
Sydney.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you vote off Ty because you've seen how he struggles when people challenge him. So you kind of want him in your final tribal council.
Yep.
I can see an argument for taking out Michelle just because they've mentioned that Michelle hasn't pissed anybody off.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'd probably go with voting out the person that had more agency in the game and take out Sydney.
Yeah, no, I actually did think it over with Michelle, and if Aubrey is cluing in to the possibility of a final two, I actually think Michelle might really be a good target, because I kind of feel like Sydney and Ty both might take her to the final two more than Michelle would.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in front of a jury, you just kind of at this point have to have confidence in yourself, and that the jury's going to recognize that I'm such a much better player than Michelle, and I shouldn't worry about it. If the jury is going to be that personal.
Yeah, if you were doomed anyway, then you gave it your best shot.
And I don't know why the jury would be anti-Aubrey. Maybe there's a person or something, but for the most part, no. I don't think she was really opposed to anybody. The only person that I could see really having vitriolic feelings for Aubrey would be Debbie.
Yeah, that was the only name that jumped to my mind. And I just feel like there's even people that you would think wouldn't be huge Aubrey fans. I feel like Jason and Scott respected her game. Mm-hmm. I think Julia, probably the same thing. Neil and Joe,
they're in the bag.
I would call almost default votes for her. So right there, you've already got a majority.
Yeah, and whereas, so this is why I'd say to Sydney, it's those respect votes that are possibly out there. Jason, Scott, and Nick. We don't really know which way they're going to go. In exit interviews, they've been talking about the game. I'll say in Ponderosa, they seem pretty level-headed and accepting about the thing. I think that probably stops for Ty. I don't think that would be the case for Aubrey Sydney, but then it becomes a thing. Who would they respect more, me or Sydney? And when you look at the record, it's kind of like, we did all the same things. So it would become a real fight of I need to convince them that those were my things and not her things, and that could be a risk. Whereas, yeah, I feel like you put that on there, and if for some reason they decide, these people truly decide that Michelle is more deserving than you, then I don't know, you just take that L, and I think I could live with it.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things, you made your best move, just see if it works. Because that is your best move.
Alright, Sydney.
And this is pretty easy. Aubrey.
Yeah, for all the exact same reasons.
Just flip those reasons right back around. It's the same thing.
And an added reason is that I think she's built up a level of partnership with Michelle that she wouldn't want to turn on, because that could have some blowback. The one interesting question people have had is like, well, shouldn't she put Michelle on the jury and get her vote? But I think you lose her vote if you put her on the jury. So
if it's Sydney's decision and she turns on Michelle, then yeah, she might lose her vote. Or, you know what she could do? The one thing that she could potentially do is if she could force the tie and Michelle ends up on the jury that way, she still gets Michelle's vote.
Yeah. And, you know, that wouldn't be a bad bet. Like, do you think Michelle will be beating people in a fire-making challenge? I mean, maybe. I don't know if Aubrey is any better at it than she, but...
Yeah. And last but never, ever least, Michelle.
So this could be Michelle's big moment. This is her resume piece.
Yeah.
She wins the final challenge, and she calls the shot.
Yeah, this is the bullet point on her resume.
Yeah, the one. I think she should go after Aubrey, too, because I think that would be more impressive. And I think she's friends with Sydney.
Yep, that's really her best target. Because again, why not go to Final Tribal with Ty? I think if you're Michelle, he's definitely someone that you want to be sitting against. And... given the choice between Sydney or Aubrey, sit next to Sydney. It's the easier path.
Yeah, because I think Michelle might have a better shot at, like, loyalty bonds with jurors. I don't know how many, but there's possible. Like, Julia is an obvious possible, although I don't think she's a guaranteed vote. You know, Nick was a beauty as well. He might like her. And then maybe Scott and Jason are pissed at Sydney. In a way that I can't see them ever being pissed at Aubrey. Aubrey never promised them anything.
Right.
Now, of course, she flipped on those two too, but like the betrayal from Sydney would mean more. So yeah, I think that would be the person she'd want to sit next to.
Yep.
So there we go. We think half of them should be targeting Sydney and half of them should be targeting Aubrey, which I think leads into pretty well into predictions. Let's predict who the fourth place finisher will be. Would it be one of those two?
Seems likely to me that it'll be Sydney. It probably should be Aubrey, but I get the feeling it's going to be Sydney, and my girl's going home.
Yeah, maybe Aubrey wins, and that's how it is.
Right.
For me, even though it seems like the person they should each target would be either Sydney or Aubrey, I think they vote out Ty.
Really?
Yeah, I just think that's what they want to do.
I had given some consideration to that just based on the idea that if all you give them are women to vote for, then they're going to vote for a woman. But I think Ty is just so spectacularly bad in tribal council situations that it's not worth getting rid of Ty.
Yeah, I just don't know how well they've picked up on that. Like, I think there's still the perception that he's a dangerous player, but also I just think that it's one of those things where it's like, well, we made a final 3 alliance and we're sticking to it. You know, like, I think once you get out there and you're in there, when you have the relationships, it can be tough to make that move, especially so close to the end. And I'm not sure any of them have the stones to do it. But also, if Aubrey were to win immunity, then absolutely she should target Sydney and use that power. But what if she isn't? I think she should really be throwing Ty under the bus and just be like, hey, ladies, this is the Women's Alliance like we always promised.
Girl power, remember we've been talking about that so much?
Yeah, because she's lost her security blanket in Joe, right? In fact, that's the one thing that came out of this episode that will matter, is that Aubrey doesn't have Joe anymore. And if you watch the preview, Michelle is still talking about, hey, we need to get rid of Ty. The one person we think she could so easily beat, in fact, the 2 people we thought she could so easily beat, Jason and Ty, have been her number 1 targets this whole way.
She's been very anxious to get rid of.
Yeah, and I think I could see Sydney going for it. I think Sydney and Aubrey really like each other. So yeah, my prediction is Ty goes out at 4th.
Okay.
So that leads us to not a boot prediction, but a more interesting discussion possibly. Everybody seems to assume this is a final 2 because that makes sense. We've only got 4 people. We got 2 hours to fill. We've had 3 medevacs. But is it?
I'm going to put odds on final 3 at like I mean, I'm not super confident. I'm not going to bet the house on it, but I'll say like 70% sure it's a final three.
Yeah, so like I've been buying into the final two argument, and then Jeff Probst's interview with Dalton Ross last week seemed to really put the nail in the coffin. He all but seemed to say there's a final two. But, there was enough wiggle room that maybe he was just messing with Dalton, who really wants final twos always.
Yes. And I think what the evidence for me would be the scale of that challenge. They like doing the monstrous challenge for the final challenge. And I just get the impression that it's final three, and that means we're probably going to have a lot of padding in this episode. Maybe we'll get the old walk of shame through the fallen comrades.
Yeah, so what you're getting at, in case people didn't see it, in the preview, they show a challenge being run, and it's one of those high constructed towers. And there's 4 lanes, and all of them are doing it. So that suggests to me that's a final challenge. Like, whenever they've had a big tower thing, that's been a final challenge. Now, a commenter on our site, Barbara Anderson, pointed out that last season, the penultimate challenge was probably the bigger production than the final challenge of them, catching balls one-handed and rolling them. So it's possible. But when I saw that preview, it's like, maybe it's a final 3. If you're looking for padding, and they've done this in the past, they've had 4 people in finals before, like in Philippines and stuff. You do the reward for an advantage for the challenge.
Right.
That's one way to kill it. They also haven't had the family visit yet this season.
Yep, exactly. There's things they can do to fill out the 2 hours, which makes me think that, yeah, we're getting a final 3.
Yeah, so that's what I'm predicting as well. I'm going to go ahead and predict the final 3, and it's almost entirely based on what we saw in the preview. So then we now have to predict how people are going to finish in that final 3.
All right. And so who's your third place then?
I have Sydney in third.
Okay, I'm going to go with Ty.
Okay, and obviously neither of us could flip the opposite way because we have them at final 4.
Exactly.
The reason why I have Sydney is I think if this was like a ranked ballot, she'd be second place on most ballots. I just think that she doesn't get as many first place ballots as my second place prediction, who would be Michelle.
Okay, and second place for me, also Michelle.
Yeah, so how I have it is Sydney gets Debbie's vote, Michelle gets Julia and Ty's, because Ty is betrayed by Aubrey for one last time. And then, obviously Aubrey is our winner, getting everybody else's vote.
Yeah, and I have it roughly similarly. I mean, I didn't actually total up the votes, but...
Well, you probably have Ty getting no votes, right?
Yeah, and Aubrey getting basically the majority of the votes. Michelle will get, 1 or 2 votes thrown her way.
Yeah, like maybe she gets Julia's, maybe Sydney's pissed.
I'm not even sure that she gets Julia's, but yeah, sure.
Yeah. Again, me neither. But that's just kind of how I worked it out. Obviously, there's also a potential that it's a tie for second place. But yeah, so that's my predictions. Ty 4th, Sydney 3rd, Michelle 2nd, Aubrey 1st, us giving an incredibly smug podcast.
Yep, totally different from every other week.
Yes. Oh yeah. We're usually so humble. So this is usually how we end the podcast with predictions. Don't turn off just yet. We just that's all there was to discuss about this week's. So what we did is we decided to just kind of have some, bigger topics. We have one that we have there, and then we asked our readers to help us fill us out. So the first one that I kind of wanted to talk about, which is, spurred on a bit by this season and some of the comments that have happened, but more just Survivor in general, is I want to talk about the under the radar strategy. Because there are people out there who think that we don't respect their selection for the obvious winner of the season because, we only like big moves and we, under the radar is a great way to play. And, I think not so much.
Give me some evidence for your anti-under the radar argument.
Now, I should make one thing clear. It is perfectly legitimate to play under the radar for a bit in Survivor, but I think playing under the radar the entire game is a really difficult way to win Survivor in a way that people don't seem to want to recognize. And when I say people, I mean the internet fans that we interact with, because obviously, John Q, Survivor watcher, doesn't, even think of under the radar as legitimate. And I think there's probably some reasons why people are big fans of under the radar. For one, it's like saying that your favorite album is that one that nobody's ever heard of. Oh, I'm a real fan. I can appreciate the under the radar edit, not like casuals who only like the alpha males. And I think the other reason is that, Under the Radar is sadly often one of the few avenues for success for female players.
Right.
And obviously, especially our audience, heavily invested in female players. It's probably why our audience isn't so annoyingly aggro as some other audiences. But I think what people have done is they've looked at some of the big successes, the people that have played as Under the Radar and won. And there have been some, absolutely. Now, it obviously depends kind of a bit on what what you think qualifies, because sometimes it's not so much that they were playing Under the Radar as much as they were in a strategic partnership and, they had a meat shield or something like that. That's not quite Under the Radar for me. But you still have people like Visepia or Fabio, Danny, Sandra a couple times, Natalie White. So yes, there's been people that have won. The first thing I'll say about that is, what was the last Under the Radar winner?
Yeah, and you kind of touched on something earlier there, that there are certain people for whom Under the Radar is probably their best strategy because there's not too many other ways they can play. Someone like Joe, for instance, I don't know that you're necessarily going to be able to call the shots. He himself said that he can't make those emotional connections and the social bonds that he could exploit. So he kind of needed to just be the teammate / sidekick.
Yeah, no, and I agree. There are some players that aren't going to be given full agency, and maybe they're forced into this, and then there's ways to work within it. Because there's also, you can be active while still being under the radar. It doesn't always have to be this passive thing of, I'm just going to float around and see where the wind blows. However, that means it's a difficult way to win. You're forced into a way of playing that's hard. And I think, so to answer my question, I think, the last full-on under the radar winner for me is probably Fabio in Nicaragua. I could see the argument for Denise, but I feel like she was a little bit more active than under the radar would qualify. So the first argument against it is, maybe you could be successful playing under the radar before, but Survivor has changed.
In what ways? What has happened with Survivor that's made it more difficult to win that way?
So this is the other way that people like to, make fun of people that don't like Under the Radar. Oh, you're just one of those casuals who listens to Jeff Probst and his addiction for big moves. But guess what?
You're so good with the straw man arguments.
No, these are things that have actually been said to me. That's the one thing. People always think I'm inventing things. It's no, I'm just I'm using my bigger platform to reflect opinions that are thrown to me and not giving them the opportunity to voice back. That's not a straw man. That's just a different kind of argument fallacy.
Yeah, it's a single person who's voiced these opinions to you because
if you really think that there's only one person out there that always likes to call people who don't agree with them as casuals.
No, I have been on Reddit.
Yeah. But yeah, Jeff Probst is incredibly influential in the way that Survivor is shaped and played. So yes, even if it's his agenda, I think he's probably produced and cast the seasons to fit that agenda. I think they've weeded out a lot of the previous way of thinking that Under the Radar is cool and we're going to vote for the person we like more than the person we respect by constantly harping on it on television. And then future players watch that and then they see. And in his pregame instructions to people, he's always pushing that agenda. He's saying, play this game as though you're going to lose and second place is no good. And then as soon as you get somebody, that will say it, you get Sierra saying, come on, it's time to play. Why is nobody playing? That gets airtime. Whereas the person saying, hey, I'm just going to vote for whoever doesn't. So yeah, I kind of think that's changed in the show the way it is. Because it's been a long time since we've seen a jury reward an Under the Radar player.
Yeah, and there's even less airtime to this show now than there was when it started. And the cast used to be smaller, so you would get to see a lot more of the players anyway. They would just do a more even distribution of the edit rather than necessarily focusing on the quote-unquote stars of the season. So it has shifted focus so that if you want to be a person that is on TV, Under the Radar makes you end up as Cowboy Rick.
Yeah, and that Cowboy Rick is instructive. People like to talk about the successes and the handful of successes, the people that have won playing Under the Radar. Nobody seems to want to talk about the incredible, overwhelming string of people who have failed miserably playing Under the Radar. I feel like you are more likely to get and this isn't for Cowboy Rick because he didn't get this far, but of course if he had, this is what would have happened. Either completely ignored by the final jury or destroyed by the final jury for playing under the radar. Far more than they're going to say, you played a great game, you're getting my vote.
Yeah, and a bunch of the winner examples you mentioned were women, but a bunch of the other examples that are jumping to my mind are guys, Carter in Philippines just skated by for a long time. At least it seemed to us. I think from exit interviews, people were claiming he did more, but I don't think it was enough to get airtime. So he was skating by, and it's just not going to get rewarded with screen time or with a jury.
Yeah, and it's tough, to completely rate people that got voted out because, maybe they get buried in the edit for other reasons as well. But the people who sat there in front of a jury expecting their under the radar style of play to be respected and rewarded, they often don't, right? How much did that help Sherry Beethman? How much did that help anybody who faced Boston Rob in the finals? How much did it help the people that faced Natalie Anderson? How much did it help Tasha Fox last season? Under the radar in the modern Survivor, and I'm just going to say the past 5 years Survivor, tends to not be respected at all in juries. So it's not necessarily a great strategy. What it is it's a long odds play. And as you said, sometimes those are the only odds you got. But as a comparison, so yes, you can win playing under the radar. Another way you can win Survivor? Beasting challenges.
Yeah. And again, long odds play. I mean,
yeah.
It can work. It's happened.
Yeah, it's happened at least twice, right? And at least with Mike and with Tom. I'd say you could stretch it a bit to the people who needed to win out to be able to advance, so like a Jenna Marasco or something like that. But yeah, it's a hard way to play. And guess what? Nobody on the internet respects it as a way of playing. So like, oh, as soon as you lose, you're gonna go out.
Well,
so that's a stupid way to play. Joe Anglim's a terrible Survivor player. He doesn't know how to play.
Let's not generalize to the whole internet here, because Facebook is a part of the internet.
The only people who spend all of their time listening to podcasts.
Okay. Fair.
All right. But yeah, like, we don't respect that because, beasting challenges is often not a way we can conceive of it. But also because, yeah, it's a really tough line to balance. And I think people have ignored that the same thing is true for Under the Radar, because if you look at most of the Under the Radar players, the way they were able to get the jury to vote for them was go up against a despicable player.
Yeah, or an otherwise just non-entity.
Yeah, but it's tough to be just a slightly more above Under the Radar than somebody else.
Right, exactly. That's the thing, is that's really, really hard to pull that off. And Vesepi is really the only one that jumps to mind for me in that case.
Yeah, so Natalie White. Oh, she got to play against Russell. Danny, they hated Stephanie. Fabio, those people were disliked. Sandra, also Russell. And Lil. It's you have to get somebody that the jury hates to go up against you. But if you're Under the Radar, you often don't get to call the shots of who you get to go up against in the finals.
Right.
So yeah, it can be done, but it's hard. And we should start acting like the person that's playing Under the Radar probably can't win Survivor unless so many things break right their way. So maybe it's not I'm going to go out in Survivor and just hope not to get voted out. I don't think you can win that way.
The thing is, it's a perfectly acceptable strategy for a portion of the game. For a while, sure, go under the radar. But at a certain point, you're probably going to have to be a little more assertive. Yeah,
no, that's Natalie Anderson, right?
Yep.
She stayed under the radar, used some meat shields, but then she knew she had to step out. And she did. And then she gets to the finals, and then the people that were Jacqueline, hey, look at that. Nobody respected her. So again, if your move is to say, I'm just going to avoid getting voted out, more often than not, you're going to have a tough time finding a jury motivated to write your name down.
All right, let's get to the fun stuff, because we had listener questions this week.
Absolutely. So we'll kick this off. We put this out on Twitter and on our comments section. So you're going to get a bunch of screen names as the questions. So Count Bolitzula asked.
Count Bolitzula.
That's what I said.
Bolitzula? The emphasis matters here.
The emphasis was on the wrong syllable?
Exactly.
All right. Well, he asked. Say he, right?
Of course.
Is this the strongest female cast, not including returnee seasons, in terms of competence and entertainment?
And I bet everyone is expecting the answer is yes. But I have the counterpoint here, and I think I'm right. If we're talking only the women, I'd probably put this cast second all time, because first place is Australia. Australia has Jerry, Tina, Alicia, Elizabeth, Amber, and Kimmy. And even
Mad Dog and Deb.
Yeah, I was going to say, even Mad Dog and Deb, there's at least some goofiness to their little quick story arcs before they go home. That's a pretty impressive cast of women.
See, I didn't even have the season second, because yes, I actually had Australia written down too. I will say that I think the reason why you asked that is it's the best in a long time.
It is. Yeah, and the women were better than the men this season. They were much more interesting. They were better players. They were more fun to watch.
Yeah, and that doesn't just include like the women that are going to be in next week's show, like some of the early on ones. Like Anna was very interesting.
Debbie,
absolutely. Yes, thank you. Even Julia had some spark, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you had Australia. Let's go back even one more season.
Oh.
What about that Murderer's Row on Borneo? You got Sue, Colleen, Gretchen, Jenna. Wigglesworth was interesting for what she was. Even like Ramona and Stacey Stillman.
You a big Sonia fan?
It doesn't have to be 100% because like, come on, those are some legends. Now, obviously the thing with these two seasons is they have a couple of things majorly in their favor.
Yep.
Nostalgia, Survivor was such a bigger deal back then. And most importantly, like we got to know characters in a way that we don't anymore.
Yeah. There was, again, this is one of the things I was talking about earlier. The smaller cast, longer airtime for the show, you got to see a lot more of these people, and they were much more interested in obscuring the winner, so they were spreading the confessionals and the edit time around between these people to keep you guessing.
Yeah. So I got one from the middle seasons.
Go for it.
How about China?
I thought of China as well. It's wow, this is a bad term talking about a cast of women, but it's too top heavy. Yeah, exactly.
So in the spirit of that, you have Amanda.
Yep.
But Courtney, PG, I think Jamie was pretty interesting.
Yep.
Even Lunch Lady, Denise was an interesting character.
Sure.
Shreya was fine. So yeah, I don't know if I'd put it ahead of this, but it's in the discussion.
Yeah, they're up there. I couldn't rank it higher because again, it was obviously the highs of that cast are better than the highs here, but once you get past that top tier, it falls off a lot.
Yeah. And I think that's where it was for me. I think the highs are higher, and that I value that. Because I do feel like this Final Four is already starting to get a little overrated.
I think it's actually, the thing I like about this Final Four is that all of them are likable, and I don't feel like any of them are just super goats. I mean, yeah. Ty, to a degree, seems like a goat now just because it feels like he's going to do terribly at a final tribal council, but he's not what you would traditionally define as a goat.
Agreed. All right. Want to go to the next question?
Sure. Other Scott suggested that we answer this. What hasn't happened yet on the show that you most want to see and why?
So in his question, he basically gave the answer, when he was giving different examples that it could be a tie at the finals.
Yep. So that is the answer, because we got 0 votes last season, which was, I think, probably the only other real contender for this question.
So I have one other answer.
Go for it.
It would be interesting to see a rock draw that worked out for the underdog group that was going into it.
Oh.
So we've only had 2 rock draws. The first one, I mean, we didn't even know what the heck it was, and it didn't really matter. It's like, poor Pascal. The second time was, pretty intense, but it's a bit deflating from a storytelling perspective, because the dominant alliance just won and then was able to continue on pegogging. Like, in terms of building an arc, it's like, oh, the underdogs are there. They finally convinced somebody to flip to their side. And then they lose, and it's like Katie that was taken out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, though, it was impressive that the winner was involved in that rock draw and survived it.
Oh yeah, like I'm not saying it was interesting for its own sake, and
right.
Taking out Tyson would have been kind of sucky in its own way.
Yep.
But it would be, I think it would be, and it hasn't happened yet, it would be really exciting if that group that's down numbers, and obviously they have to get to even numbers at some point, but is able to convince somebody on the other side that you're last in this alliance. Come vote with us. We're going to take our stand. We're putting it all on the line, and then won. and the whole storyline of the season kind of flips on its head, and the dominant players fall, all based on a rock draw. Like, I feel like that would be something we're seeing. It'd be pretty cool.
All right. The one thing with the final tribal tie, in case we didn't emphasize this enough, Probst has put it out there over the years. They do have a procedure in mind for what they will do. So we kind of want to know what that is, because they're not going to tell us. It's going to have to actually happen. And as an added bonus, it would mean that we'd have a close vote at a final tribal council, which is not something we've had in a very long time.
Very long time. And if it were to happen, like, this season wouldn't be a bad one for it, because what I would like it to happen is two people that are, pretty equal.
Yeah, solid competitors, basically, yeah.
Yeah, people, I'm happy with either of them winning, so then it wouldn't be like, oh wow, that person won on a weird technicality. Although I doubt it'll be a technicality. I think it'll be somewhat merit-based, whatever they go for. You, me, Matt, a lot of us have already thought that they'll just let the third place finisher vote.
Yep.
They might do like a revote or something first, but, I think it would go to that. So yeah, like this season, if it was like Sydney and Aubrey tie, I'm cool. Yeah, you guys one of you almost won. Let's see what happens.
Yep. I have a feeling, though, that eventuality would have gotten a lot of hype.
Well, hey, we've gotten the hype that something for Survivor first will happen.
Yeah, sure. I have a feeling it'd be a little more emphasis. So next question, Something Quirky wants to know, what other names did you consider for the podcast?
None. We nailed it on the first try.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, did we pitch any others? I think I suggested bring back Courtney Moon, but you turned that one down.
I think this was before your Courtney obsession. Or at least before I knew of it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I would have started a podcast with that guy.
Yeah, with the crazy man who was suggesting we bring back a not even first boot from a season. I think when it came together, you just suggested it, and I was like, yeah, that's the winner. That's the deep pull name that the Survivor nerds will love.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this is we kind of go a bit into our history really quickly, is that a lot of you have been with us for a while know that we started on the AV Club, and how this podcast came together is John and I would kind of have like a series of escalating dares around a podcast. We talked about Survivor on the AV Club comments, and then we talk about it a bit on Twitter. And anytime we get too geeked into it, which started with you start launching the fantasy game, we would kid around like, oh, we'll know we're too far gone if we ever start a podcast.
And then we started the podcast.
Yeah, so then we're like, haha, it'd be so funny if we had a podcast and this is what we would do. And all this. And I think we still weren't even sure we were doing a podcast when I'd be like, oh, maybe we'd name it the Purple Rock. And then suddenly, oh God, I think we're going to do a podcast.
Yeah, and I think even then it was like, oh, we'll just do it as a one-off and it'll be hilarious.
And then we've done it every week during the season since. Yeah, and let's just say, like, this was back when there wasn't that many podcasts.
Yeah, there might have only been 12 or 13 back then.
Yeah. But it was just like, so it wasn't like, we'll know we're too far gone as Survivor fans when we start a podcast. It was more like we're too deep into nerdery. Because, many nerdy subjects have podcasts. So,
yep.
Yeah. That's what it was. Purple Rock. It was a fit of inspiration. We didn't even really think about it, that deep dive of how, like, easy it made branding and stuff.
Yeah. The one thing I regret, we should have worked a little harder on a name that was better for SEO. Oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as we were done, like, oh, it really should have been Purple Rock Survivor.
Yeah, we should have had the word Survivor in there somewhere. Damn it. Next question. Violina23 wants to know, why do you guys think everyone has been so obsessed with the edit this season? I know we, meaning on our site, the blog, AV Club, have always had fun with this idea of reading the edit, but why has the internet suddenly gone so crazy about it in this particular season? Do we think it stems from Probst's preseason comments?
I mean, maybe, because some people, like, use that and supposed lack of hype for this season to suggest that the winner would be somebody that Probst wouldn't like or whatever. But I think, honestly, it's because the person that the people that are so focused on edit are 100% sure is winning is Michelle. Yeah, and it's like, really? Her? And I think that's where it all stems from. A bunch of people have staked their reputations in a hard line. This is the winner. And for the rest of us, it's like, but she's not a winner. Like, yeah, so in previous seasons, they could have done it just as quickly as like, Jeremy is the winner. And we all been like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Feels right.
Same with other people, Mike. But like when it became a person who the only way you come to that conclusion is by reading the subtext of edits, then I think that's what starts the big battle.
Yeah, and I think even, someone who did go under the radar for a little while, like Natalie in San Juan del Sur, I think we still would have totally believed, oh yeah, she could still end up winning this season. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility. There were at least some clues there. She'd been shown having some sort of agency in the game at certain points. So we're like, okay, well, that seems reasonable.
Yeah, she had the John Rocker thing. She had that, she was the one that called the shot against Douchebag.
Right.
Yeah, like we were like, oh yeah, she's on the list. She's a contender.
Yep. But I will agree with Violina. It has been a little weird this season. And honestly, we cannot point fingers because I've definitely done the why hasn't Probst into this season thing. So, and weirdly, by the way, he's still only tepidly endorsing it. Like this week he was saying something like, people are telling me it's a great season. Like, do you not think that it's a good season? It's been pretty good. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he knows something.
Yeah.
But like, I really do think it's because of the person that the people that are focused on edit, chose.
Yep.
I don't think you get this if it's somebody where the rest of us could be like, oh yeah. Because like, here's the thing with the edit discussion. Because, obviously we've been opposed, and me especially, I've gone on, I don't know, maybe one or two rants. I'm not opposed to considering edit and the function that it tells in storytelling for a television show. Alright? We've always in the past, as Violina is getting into, talked about it. But we didn't deep dive into, every little nook and cranny. We were like, yeah, this person feels like a winner because the show is making them look good. Right.
The 0% Club thing that we used to do was mostly based on what the edit was telling us about certain players.
Yeah, and like, and a part of, Matt's big post in when he was going against Edgic is like, congratulations for picking all these winners. We did too, In fact, we picked the one that you guys all refused to see. Because, Survivor will often make, and especially lately, winners look obvious. I don't think they've done that this season. No matter which side of this fight you get on, I don't think there's an obvious winner. But the other side really thinks that there was, and not only do they think there is, they thought so early. Like, from the jump, and every episode since is they framed as, see?
Here's this week's supporting evidence.
Yeah, and I think it's because the only way you could talk about Michelle for the longest time, I think in the past couple of weeks, there's been actual content to talk about.
Yeah, which has been nice.
Yeah, for the longest time, it's been these minor little things that only the people in those communities can pick up on. And I think the reason why it escaped is because nobody else was talking about it. There was no reason to talk about Michelle for the first part of the season. And some of this isn't her fault. She didn't go to tribal council until like 24 days into the game.
We had no reason to see her on our TV.
Yeah, but like there are shows out there that structured their entire season on Michelle. And, if she wins, then bully for them. If she loses, like, was that a worthwhile endeavor? And I know, we fed into this, and to some part by regret. But we weren't the first to start this conversation. I think we were probably one of the earliest to start the rebuttal. But they focused on that, and the rest of us were just like, but no.
All right, let's move off the Michelle debate, because trust me, there will be some more time to discuss it if we have to next week.
Well, we have to. It's going to go one way or the other.
Yep,
Either
exactly.
We're going to be crowing or eating some.
Right. All right, final question. This is a fun one to end on. Congratulations, Mr. Burks Buttons. This is a good one. Which survivor would you most want to play with as an ally, and why?
Yeah, so where he's pointing as if it's a mostly newbie season, but they bring in a couple of ringers, who would you want that to be? And, he said for the argument, this All-Star will work with you, but you can't guarantee that they will continue to work with you throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
What did you got?
Okay, so I went with Dawn because I feel like if I'm on the show, I've kind of got to try to repeat Cochran's Caramoan strategy. Why not get someone with experience? Have Dawn handle the emotional connections with people, because that's the skill I'm most likely to be lacking in. So I need a Dawn.
That is a solid answer, especially for you.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, for me, I went with Stephen Fishbach, and reasoning's pretty simple. To 2 out of 2 times his closest ally went on to win unanimously. So I'll be that guy.
Odds are in your favor then, huh?
That's right. I'll be his JT. I'll be his Jeremy. And to further it, yeah, the fishback doctrine, as Rob likes to talk about a lot, is based on loyalty, right?
Yep.
So yeah, he seems like a good ally to have. Now, I would say the one weak spot is kind of getting at you're getting at. He doesn't necessarily help me in the areas I'm weak. So we will have to find somebody to help us win challenges.
You may need a meat shield in there.
Yeah.
What's funny is you could probably use Dawn as your meat shield.
She is quite good at these things.
Yep.
She's probably stronger than me. So there you go. Those are our questions from the readers. I want to thank everybody who helped us out because seriously, we did not want to spend an episode talking about an old man who couldn't poop.
Yep. We'll save that for Gabon if Bob gets any constipation issues. I haven't seen it yet.
No spoilers.
Speaking of which, we'll be talking about Gabon in the off season. And we'll do that on our website, which is purplerockpodcast.com. We're still working out how exactly we're going to schedule this. Basically, Matt and I and Mark have never seen Gabon. We're all going to watch it. We're going to do some sort of content on the website about it. If you guys have suggestions on the stuff you'd like to see us do for it, please let us know. Leave a comment on the website. Hit us up on Twitter. Andy is at Purple Rock Andy. I'm at Purple Rock John. The show is at Purple Rock Pod. And if, God forbid, you want to talk to Mark, Matt, or Emma, just throw their names at the end of Purple Rock and you can tweet at them.
Such good branding.
Thanks to you.
I was a genius at picking that name. You can email us at purplerockpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, with your suggestions for Gabon, I'll say right now, a weekly podcast for every episode is not one we will be taking.
Yeah, that suggestion goes straight to the trash bin.
Because we appreciate our off season. It is a time to reflect, a time to get excited about whatever next Nerd Girl the show casts for future seasons.
Hey, we've already picked her out.
Indeed, you guys have.
Not me, for the record. Not me.
We'll see. All it needs her to take is one video making some nerd reference that you love so much.
I'm telling you, if she comes out there and grabs a stick and acts like she's Arya in Game of Thrones, I'm sold.
Telling you. Easy. All right. So until then, might as well listen to some theme music.
That's what it's like when a woman wants a baby.